Fuels are, quite literally, the engine of our world. They powered the Industrial Revolution and they get us to work today. But here's the thing, not all fuels are created equal. So today, we're going to break down the science of energy, from the ancient power of coal all the way to the future of biofuels.
So let's start with a big question. If you were an engineer and you could design the absolute perfect fuel from scratch, what would it look like? What properties would it have? This isn't just a fun little thought experiment. It's the central challenge that has been driving energy innovation for centuries.
So here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll define what makes a fuel good in the first place. Then, we'll dig deep into coal, how it's made, and how we grade it. After that, we'll get into that weird pinging sound in your car's engine. And finally, we'll look at the pros and cons of modern fuels like ethanol and biodiesel. All right, let's jump in.
Okay, so first things first. Before we can compare fuels, we need a standard. What are the key characteristics we're actually looking for when we evaluate an energy source?
You can think of it like a checklist for the perfect fuel. Number 1, you want a high calorific value. That's just a fancy way of saying you get more energy out of it, more bang for your buck. You also want low moisture because you don't want to waste heat just boiling water. Next, a moderate ignition temperature. It should be easy to light, but not so easy that it's, a huge safety risk. And of course, you want it to burn clean, be easy to move around, and leave behind as little useless ash as possible. It's a really tough balancing act.
And this chart, it's basically our map for the entire world of fuels. You see, everything starts as either natural, think coal or crude oil, stuff we just dig up, or artificial, meaning we've processed it somehow, like turning oil into gasoline. Then, from there, we just sort them by their state, solid, liquid, or gas. This simple tree is going to be our guide for the rest of this journey.
So let's start on that solid, natural branch of the tree with the fuel that really kicked off the modern age, coal. It was the absolute bedrock of the Industrial Revolution, and it's all formed from ancient plant matter over millions and millions of years.
And you can see that whole journey right here. See, coal isn't just one thing, it's more like a family, and each member represents a different stage of a long process. It all starts as this soggy, plant-based material called peat. Then, over millions of years, incredible pressure and heat squeeze out the water and concentrate the carbon, turning it into lignite, then into the very common bituminous coal, and finally, into the king of coals, anthracite, which is almost pure carbon.
So, let's say you're running a power plant and a huge shipment of coal arrives. How do you know if you got the good stuff? Well, you can't just look at it. You have to analyze its chemical makeup to figure out what you're really working with.
And the way they do this is with something called proximate analysis. Honestly, the best way to think about it is like a nutrition label for coal. It's a standard process where they carefully heat the coal to measure 4 key things: how much useful carbon it has, how much flammable gas is trapped inside, how much water it holds, and finally, how much useless junk, or ash, is left over.
Now, the first and most important component on that label is fixed carbon. This is the star of the show. It's the solid stuff that provides most of the heat. So the bottom line is super simple. A higher percentage of fixed carbon means more heat. This is what you're really paying for. Next up is something called volatile matter. These are basically gases like methane and hydrogen that are trapped inside the coal. Now, if you have a lot of this stuff, the coal will light up really, really easily, which sounds great. The catch? It also produces a much longer flame, which can be a problem for certain furnaces. So it's a bit of a trade-off. And then we get to the villain of the story, ash. This is all the inorganic, non-burnable junk mixed in with the coal. It doesn't create any heat, it doesn't do anything useful, it just turns into a massive, costly waste product that you have to get rid of. Not to mention, it's abrasive and can actually damage your equipment. So when it comes to coal, less ash is always, always better. All right, let's shift gears. Literally, we're moving from solid fuels that make heat to the liquid fuels that create motion. We're diving into the internal combustion engine and a pesky problem that drove early car designers crazy: engine knock. If you've ever been in an old car struggling up a hill, you might have heard this metallic pinging sound. That is engine knock, and it's a really bad sign. It means that instead of a smooth, even burn, little pockets of fuel are exploding violently, all out of sync. This rogue explosion actually fights against the engine, wasting power and causing some serious damage over time. I mean, just look at the difference here. In a healthy engine, you get this smooth, controlled flame that pushes the piston down with a nice, steady force. It's like a firm shove. Knocking, on the other hand, is like a punch. It's a violent shock wave that smacks into the piston while it's still trying to move up.
That collision is what makes the pinging sound and just absolutely robs the engine of its power.
So, to fight this, scientists came up with the octane scale. And we can think of it with a hero and a villain. The hero is a molecule called isooctane. It burns beautifully, super smooth, so we give it a perfect score of 100. The villain is N-heptane. It knocks like crazy, so it gets a big fat 0. The octane rating you see at the gas pump, it's just telling you how well your fuel performs compared to a mix of our hero and villain here.
Now, you might have also heard of a cetane number, and that's for diesel engines. It's basically the flip side of the octane coin. For gasoline, a high octane number means the fuel is really good at resisting ignition until the spark plug says so. For diesel, a high cetane number means the fuel is really good at igniting quickly just from compression. So you could say octane is about patience, while cetane is about being ready to go. But for both, a higher number means a happier, healthier engine.
Okay, on to our final section. Let's see how all these ideas come together when we look at the modern mix of fuels, from the gas we use every day to some of the renewable alternatives that are really changing the game. First, we've got gaseous fuels like natural gas, which is mostly methane, and LPG, which is propane or butane. These guys check a lot of the boxes on our good fuel list. They have a really high calorific value, and they burn incredibly clean with no smoke or soot. Plus, they have a great safety feature. They're lighter than air, so if there's a leak, the gas just dissipates up and away instead of pooling on the ground. Then you've got power alcohol, or ethanol, which you often see blended into gasoline. So what are the trade-offs? Well, the pros are pretty big. It's a renewable resource, it burns cleaner, and it has a high octane number, so it's great at preventing that engine knock we talked about. The cons? It has a lower energy content, meaning you get slightly worse mileage, and it can be corrosive to some older fuel system parts. And it's a similar story for biodiesel, which is made from things like vegetable oils. The upsides are awesome. It's renewable, it's biodegradable, and it's pretty efficient. The downsides? Well, it can thicken up and even freeze in cold weather, which is a huge problem for storage and transport. And just like ethanol, it can degrade some of the rubber hoses and gaskets in older vehicles. And this really gets us to the main point. As this quote from our source material puts it, choosing the right fuel is never, ever simple. It's always a complex balancing act between how much it costs, how easy it is to get, how much pollution it creates, and how well it actually performs. There's just no single perfect fuel for every single job. And that leaves us with one final thought. We've seen this huge family tree of fuels, from ancient solids to modern biofuels. Every single one has its own unique profile of power and of problems. So the big question for all of us is, as we look to the future, which of these branches are we going to rely on, and what new ones might we need to grow?